Kyle Bennett walked home from his shift at the grocery store like he did every night. The streets were quiet, and the streetlights cast long shadows on the empty sidewalks. He had worked a double shift and his feet hurt. All he wanted was to get home and sleep. As he turned the corner near the old park, he noticed something strange. An old man sat on a bench that was usually empty at this hour. The man wore a long gray coat and had a white beard that reached his chest. In front of him on the bench lay various items spread out on a cloth. Watches, rings, and other small things that glinted in the dim light. Kyle normally would have walked past, but something made him stop. Maybe it was curiosity, or maybe it was the way the old man looked directly at him and smiled. "Come closer, young man," the old man said in a voice that sounded like wind through trees. "I have something that belongs to you." Kyle hesitated but stepped closer. He looked at the items on the cloth. Most of them looked old and worn. But one watch caught his eye. It was silver with strange symbols carved into its surface. The symbols seemed to move when he looked at them, though that had to be a trick of the light. "How much for the watch?" Kyle asked, pointing at it. The old man picked it up and held it out. $20, he said. "But I must warn you, this watch will change your life forever. Once you take it, there is no going back." Kyle laughed nervously. "It is just a watch, right?" The old man did not smile. He simply held it out, waiting. Kyle pulled a $20 bill from his wallet and handed it over. The moment the money touched the old man's hand, something strange happened. The air around them shimmered like heat waves on hot pavement. Kyle blinked, and when he opened his eyes, the old man was gone. The bench was empty except for the watch that now sat in Kyle's palm. He looked around, confused. Where did the man go? There was nowhere to hide, no alleys nearby, no buildings close enough to reach that fast. The old man had simply vanished. Kyle stared at the watch in his hand. His heart beat faster. Maybe he was more tired than he thought. Maybe he was seeing things. He slipped the watch into his pocket and hurried home. His apartment was small but comfortable. One bedroom, a tiny kitchen, and a living room barely big enough for a couch and television. Kyle dropped his keys on the counter and pulled the watch from his pocket. Under the light of his kitchen lamp, it looked even stranger. The symbols carved into it were definitely moving now, flowing across the silver surface like water. He strapped it onto his wrist. It fit perfectly, as if it had been made for him. The metal was warm against his skin. Kyle made himself a sandwich and sat on his couch. He turned on the television but could not focus on the show. His eyes kept going back to the watch. The symbols continued their slow dance across its face. Finally, he gave up trying to relax and went to bed. He set his alarm and closed his eyes. Sleep came quickly. At exactly midnight, Kyle woke up. He did not know why at first. Then he noticed the light. A soft blue glow filled his bedroom. He sat up and saw that the glow came from the watch on his wrist. The symbols were spinning, now moving faster and faster. Then a voice spoke. It came from the watch itself, clear and strong, like someone standing right next to him. "Your bride lands in 3 minutes. Kyle jumped out of bed, his heart pounding. What kind of joke was this? Watches did not talk. This was impossible. He ran to his bedroom window and looked out at the backyard. Everything seemed normal. The grass, the fence, the old tree in the corner. Nothing moved. 2 minutes, the watch said. Kyle pressed his face against the glass. His breath fogged the window. This could not be real. He must be dreaming. Then he saw it. A shadow passed over the moon. Something huge blocked out the light for a moment. Kyle stepped back from the window, his hands shaking. 1 minute. The shadow grew larger. Kyle could hear it now. A sound like thunder, but rhythmic. Like giant wings beating the air. 30 seconds. Kyle ran downstairs and threw open his back door. The sound was louder now. The wind picked up, whipping through the yard. Leaves scattered across the grass. 10 seconds. Kyle stood frozen in his doorway, unable to move, unable to look away from the sky. Then it appeared. A massive creature dropped from the clouds, wings spread wide. It was a dragon. An actual dragon with scales that shimmered purple and black in the moonlight. Its eyes glowed like embers, and when it opened its mouth, Kyle saw rows of teeth as long as his arm. The dragon landed in his backyard with impossible grace. The ground barely shook. Its wings folded against its sides, and it lowered its enormous head. Sitting on the dragon's back was a woman. She had long silver hair that flowed down her back, and when she turned to look at Kyle, he saw that her ears came to points. Her eyes glowed faintly green, and she wore armor that looked like it was made from moonlight itself. She slid down from the dragon and walked toward Kyle. Her movements were smooth and confident. She stopped a few feet away and studied him with those glowing eyes. "I am Leora," she said in a voice that sounded like music, "and you must be Kyle Bennett." Kyle tried to speak, but no words came out. His mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water. "The watch you wear belonged to my father," Leora continued. "It is a very special item. It searches across worlds for someone with a pure heart and great courage. It has chosen me for what Kyle finally managed to say. To be my partner," Leora said simply. "To stand beside me in the war that is coming. To help save your world and mine from the darkness that approaches." Kyle looked at the dragon behind her. The creature watched him with intelligent eyes that seemed to see right through him. "This is Ember," Leora said, gesturing to the dragon. "She has been my companion since I was a small child." "We have traveled very far to find you." Kyle felt dizzy. This could not be happening. Dragons did not exist. Elves did not exist. And they certainly did not land in his backyard at midnight. But the watch on his wrist was still glowing. And the dragon before him was very real. He could feel the heat coming from its body. Could smell something like cinnamon and smoke in the air. "I know this is difficult to understand," Leora said, stepping closer. "You have many questions. But time is short. Your world is in great danger and I need your help." She reached out her hand toward him. Her fingers were long and delicate, but Kyle could see calluses from sword work. "Will you come with me?" she asked. "Will you learn to be a dragon rider? Will you fight beside us when the enemy arrives?" Kyle looked at her hand, then at the dragon. Then at the watch on his wrist that had started all of this. His whole life had been ordinary. Wake up, go to work, come home, sleep, and repeat. Nothing exciting ever happened to him. Nothing magical or wonderful or terrifying, until tonight. Kyle took a deep breath and reached out. His hand closed around Leora's and he felt a spark of energy pass between them. "Tell me everything," he said. Leora sat down on the grass in Kyle's backyard as if giant dragons landing at midnight was the most normal thing in the world. "Ember." The dragon settled beside her and rested her massive head on the ground. The creature's eyes never left Kyle as he slowly sat down across from them. "My people are called the Silvari," Leora began. "We come from a world very different from yours. Our cities float in the sky held up by ancient magic. We live among the clouds and the stars, and we have done so for thousands of years." Kyle listened, trying to process everything. A dragon was lying in his backyard. An elf woman was telling him about floating cities. This was the strangest night of his entire life. The Silvari bond with dragons when we are young. Leora continued, running her hand along Ember's scales. "The bond is more than friendship. We share thoughts and feelings. Ember knows what I need before I speak, and I understand her in ways that words cannot describe." Ember made a low rumbling sound deep in her chest. It sounded almost like a cat purring, but much deeper and louder. "We lived in peace for many generations," Leora said, but her voice grew sad. "We had everything we needed. Food, water, safety. Our magic protected us from harm. We grew comfortable. We forgot that the universe can be dangerous." "What happened?" Kyle asked. "The void swarm came," Leora said, and her glowing eyes dimmed. "They appeared without warning. Creatures made of living darkness that consume everything in their path. They eat light and life and leave only emptiness behind." She pulled a small crystal from a pouch at her belt. She held it up and it began to glow. Images appeared in the air above the crystal like a hologram. Kyle saw beautiful cities made of white stone floating among clouds. He saw dragons of every color flying in formation. Gardens that seemed to grow upward instead of down. Waterfalls that float up instead of falling. "This was my home," Leora said quietly. The image changed. Dark shapes appeared in the sky. They had no real form, just blackness that moved and twisted. Wherever they touched, things disappeared. Buildings vanished. Trees turned to dust. Even the light itself seemed to die. "We fought back," Leora continued. "Our greatest warriors rode into battle. Our most powerful mages cast spells that could level mountains. But nothing worked. The swarm just kept coming. For every creature we destroyed, 10 more appeared. The images showed dragons breathing fire at the dark shapes. They showed elves firing arrows of pure light. But the swarm surrounded them, consumed them, turned them into nothing. We lost half our cities in the first month," Leora said. "Millions of my people died. Ember and I fought in every battle. We watched friends disappear into the darkness. We watched the swarm grow stronger." Kyle felt cold despite the warm night air. "Why are they doing this?" We do not know, Leora said, putting the crystal away. They do not communicate. They do not negotiate. They simply consume and move on to the next world. We have tracked their path across the galaxy. Hundreds of planets have fallen to them, and Earth is next, Kyle said. Leora nodded. In 3 months they will arrive here. Your world has no magic, no dragons, no way to fight them. Unless we help you. Unless you help us. Kyle stood up and paced back and forth. His mind raced with questions. Why me? What can I possibly do against creatures that destroyed your entire civilization? Leora stood as well. My father was a wise man, a scholar who studied ancient prophecies. He found a text thousands of years old that spoke of a bridge between worlds. It said that when the great darkness came, a human would rise to unite the scattered races. Someone with no magic, but with something more important. What, Kyle asked. Hope, Leora said. The ability to adapt to survive against impossible odds. My people had magic for so long that we forgot how to fight without it. We became dependent on power instead of strategy. But humans, she smiled. Humans have survived ice ages, plagues, wars, and disasters. You rebuild. You adapt. You never give up. Kyle thought about human history. She was right in a way. Humans had faced extinction many times and always found a way through. My father created the watch before he died, Leora continued.
He poured his life force into it.
Made it search across dimensions for the right person, someone pure of heart who would stand with us not for glory or power, but because it was the right thing to do. She reached out and touched the watch on Kyle's wrist. It pulsed with blue light at her touch. It chose you, Kyle, she said. Out of billions of humans across countless versions of Earth, it chose you. I do not pretend to understand how or why, but I trust my father's magic. And I trust that you are who we need. Kyle looked at Ember. The dragon had been watching him this whole time. Those ancient eyes seemed to look into his soul. What would I have to do, he asked. Come with us to my world, Leora said. Train to become a dragon rider. Learn our ways of combat. When the swarm reaches Earth, you will lead the defense. You will be the bridge between your people and mine. Together we have a chance, and if I say no, Leora looked away. Then I return home alone, and in 3 months your world dies. Everyone you know, everyone you love will be consumed by the darkness, and I will have failed my father who believed the prophecy was true. Kyle sat back down. He put his head in his hands. This was too much. Yesterday his biggest worry was whether he would get Sunday off from work. Now he was being asked to save the entire world. But as he sat there, he thought about his life. His boring job, his empty apartment, his routine that never changed. What was he really giving up, and what would happen if he refused? Could he live knowing he had a chance to help and walked away? He looked up at Leora. If I come with you, will I be able to return to Earth? Yes, she said. The gateway between worlds works both ways. You can visit your home whenever you wish, though time moves differently between our worlds. 1 week there might be 1 day here. Kyle took a deep breath. How long do I have to train? 1 week in my world, Leora said. Then we launch our attack on the swarm's forward base. If we can destroy it, we buy Earth more time. Maybe 6 months instead of 3. 1 week to learn to ride a dragon, Kyle said. That seems impossible. Leora smiled. The bond with a dragon is not learned, it is felt. Ember has already accepted you. I can see it in the way she watches you. The training is just to teach you how to not fall off. Ember snorted, and a small puff of smoke came from her nostrils. Kyle could swear the dragon was amused. He stood up and walked over to Ember. The dragon raised her head to look at him. Up close, she was even more massive. Her scales were hard as steel but warm to the touch. He reached out slowly and placed his hand on her neck. Ember rumbled again, that deep purring sound. Kyle felt something stir in his chest, a warmth that spread through his body. It was like meeting someone you had known your whole life but had never met before. She likes you, Leora said softly, standing beside him. That is rare. Ember does not trust easily. Kyle made his decision. All right, he said. I will come with you. I will train. I will fight. I do not know if I am the person your prophecy speaks of, but I cannot let everyone die without trying. Leora's face lit up with joy. She grabbed his hands. Thank you, Kyle. You have given us something we had lost. A chance. She pulled something from around her neck. It was a leather cord with a small tooth hanging from it. The tooth glowed with a soft orange light. This is a dragon tooth, Leora said, placing it around Kyle's neck. It will let you breathe in the high altitudes where we fly. It will also let you understand our language and let us understand yours. Wear it always. The moment the tooth touched his chest, Kyle felt different, stronger somehow, like energy was flowing through his veins. He took a deep breath and felt like his lungs could hold more air than before. Now Leora said, "We fly. Hold tight and try not to scream." She climbed onto Ember's back with practiced ease. Then she reached down to help Kyle up. He grabbed her hand and scrambled onto the dragon behind her. Ember's scales were surprisingly comfortable to sit on. He wrapped his arms around Leora's waist. "Ready," Leora called back. "No," Kyle said honestly. "Good." Leora laughed. "Neither was I the first time." Ember stood up and spread her wings. They were enormous, spanning at least 40 feet. Kyle felt the muscles in the dragon's back tense. Then Ember leaped. The ground fell away so fast that Kyle's stomach dropped. He did scream despite Leora's warning. His arms tightened around her waist as Ember beat her powerful wings and launched them into the night sky. The houses below became tiny squares of light. The streets turned into thin lines. Within seconds, they were higher than Kyle had ever been except in an airplane. But this was nothing like an airplane. He could feel every movement of Ember's body beneath them. Every beat of her wings sent them surging upward. The wind whipped past them, but somehow Kyle could breathe easily. The dragon tooth around his neck grew warm against his chest. He realized it was protecting him from the thin air and freezing cold that should have been killing him at this height. "Open your eyes," Leora called back. "You are missing the view." Kyle had not even realized he had closed them. He forced himself to look down. The city spread out beneath them like a blanket of stars. He could see the curve of the coast where the ocean met the land. In the distance, the sky was beginning to lighten with the first hint of dawn. It was the most beautiful thing he had ever seen. "This is amazing," he shouted over the wind. Leora looked back at him and smiled. "This is just the beginning. Hold on tighter. We are about to enter the gateway." Kyle followed her gaze forward. Ahead of them, the air seemed to shimmer. It looked like heat waves rising from hot pavement, except these waves were vertical. They formed a circle in the sky that pulsed with strange colors. "What is that?" Kyle asked. "The path between worlds," Leora said. "It will feel strange. Do not let go." Ember angled toward the shimmering circle. As they got closer, Kyle could see that the colors inside the circle were like nothing he had ever seen before. They were colors that should not exist. Colors his eyes could not quite understand. "Here we go," Leora called. They flew straight into the gateway. The moment they passed through, reality bent around them. Kyle felt like he was being stretched and compressed at the same time. The colors swirled past them so fast they became a blur. He heard sounds that made no sense. Whispers in languages he could not name. Music that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere. He felt like he was falling and flying at the same time. Like he was big as a planet and small as a dust particle. Time stopped making sense. Was this taking seconds or hours? He could not tell. Then just as suddenly as it started, it ended. They burst through into clear sky and Kyle gasped. The air smelled different here. Cleaner somehow. Sweeter. He took a deep breath and tasted flowers and rain and something else he could not name. "Welcome to Ethelgard," Leora said. "Welcome to my world." Kyle looked around and his jaw dropped. Above them were 3 moons. 3. They hung in the sky in a perfect triangle. One was pale blue, another was silver, and the third had a faint purple glow. But that was not the most amazing part. Below them, floating in the sky, were cities. Actual cities suspended in the clouds with no ground beneath them. White towers reached upward, connected by bridges that looked like they were made of light itself. Gardens grew on every level with plants that glowed in shades of green and gold. Waterfalls flowed between the buildings, somehow moving upward instead of falling down. And everywhere there were dragons. Dozens of them, maybe hundreds. They flew in great spiraling patterns, red dragons and blue dragons, green ones and gold ones. Some were as small as horses. Others were even larger than Ember. How Kyle whispered. "How is this possible?" Magic, Leora said simply. "The old magic that my people mastered thousands of years ago. These cities have floated here since before recorded history." Ember began to descend toward the largest of the floating cities. As they got closer, Kyle could see people moving through the streets. Elves just like Leora. Some walked along the bridges. Others flew on dragonback like they were. Everyone stopped to stare as Ember passed overhead. "They are looking at you," Leora said. Humans have not walked in Ethelgard for over 1,000 years. You are going to cause quite a stir, Great Kyle muttered. No pressure. Ember landed on a wide platform near the top of a tall tower. The moment her claws touched down, guards appeared. 6 elves in silver armor surrounded them. They held spears that crackled with blue energy. Their faces were stern and unwelcoming. State your business, one of them commanded. His voice was cold and suspicious. Leora slid down from Ember and helped Kyle dismount. I am Leora, daughter of Theron, she said, standing tall. This is Kyle Bennett. He carries my father's watch. I have brought him before the council as the prophecy foretold. The guards exchanged glances. One of them stepped forward. He was older than the others, with silver streaks in his dark hair. A human, he said the word like it was something distasteful. You bring a human before the council. Your father would be ashamed. Leora's eyes flashed with anger. My father created the watch that found him. My father believed in the prophecy, when everyone else had given up hope. Do not speak to me of shame, Captain Aldrich. The captain looked at Kyle with disgust. He is weak, small, he has no magic. What use is he to us? Kyle felt his face grow hot. He might not have magic or muscles like these guards, but he was not weak. He had agreed to come here to help them even though he had no idea what he was doing. That took courage. Before he could say anything, Ember moved. The dragon stepped between Kyle and the guards. She lowered her head and growled. It was a sound that made Kyle's bones vibrate. The guard stepped back quickly. It seems Ember disagrees with you, Captain Leora said with satisfaction. And I have never known her to be wrong about people. The captain scowled but said nothing. He gestured for them to follow. This way. The council awaits. They walked through corridors made of white stone that seemed to glow from within. Kyle stared at everything. The walls were carved with intricate designs that moved when he looked at them. Windows showed impossible views of cities and mountains and seas that could not all exist in the same place. Other elves stopped to stare as they passed. Some whispered to each other. Kyle caught words like human and prophecy and foolishness. No one smiled. No one looked welcoming. Do not mind them, Leora whispered, walking beside him. Change frightens people, especially when they are already scared. They climbed a long spiral staircase that seemed to go on forever. Kyle was breathing hard by the time they reached the top, but Leora and the guards did not even seem winded. Finally, they emerged into a massive circular room. The ceiling was a dome of crystal that showed the 3 moons above. The floor was polished black stone that reflected like a mirror. And sitting in a circle around the room were 12 elves in robes of deep blue. These were the council members, the leaders of the Silvari. An old elf woman sat in the center on a throne carved from a single piece of white wood. Her hair was long and braided in pure white. Her eyes were the same glowing green as Leora's, but darker somehow. Sadder. This was clearly someone important. Grandmother Leora said, bowing deeply. I have returned, so I see, the old woman said, and you have brought a human. She stood up and walked toward them. Her steps were slow but graceful. She stopped in front of Kyle and studied him with those ancient eyes. Kyle tried to stand straight, tried to look confident, but under her gaze he felt like a child being examined by a strict teacher. Your name, the old woman said. Kyle Bennett, he replied. His voice came out stronger than he expected. I come from Earth. The old woman nodded slowly. I am Ilara, High Queen of the Silvari, grandmother to Leora, and I must say I am disappointed. Grandmother Leora started. Ilara held up her hand for silence. Your father believed strongly in the old prophecies. He spent his last years creating that watch, searching for the bridge between worlds. And this is what his magic found. She gestured at Kyle, a boy who works in a shop, who has never held a sword, who has no magic, no training, no experience. Kyle felt anger rising in his chest. With respect, Your Majesty, he said. I'm here, I agreed to come. I agreed to fight for a world that is not mine against an enemy I do not understand. That has to count for something. Several council members gasped. Apparently humans were not supposed to talk back to queens, but Ilara smiled. It was a small, sad smile. You have courage, at least. Perhaps there is hope after all. She turned to the council. We attack the swarm's forward base in 7 days. If this human survives, he may prove useful. If he does not, at least we will know the prophecy was false. 7 days, Kyle whispered. 1 week to prepare for battle. Leora squeezed his hand. We will train from dawn to dusk, she said. I promise you will be ready. Take him to the training grounds, Ilara commanded. and pray to the old gods that your father's faith was not misplaced. As they left the council chamber, Kyle felt the weight of what he had agreed to. 1 week, 7 days. Then he would face creatures that had destroyed entire civilizations. He looked at Leora walking beside him, at Ember following behind them, at the strange, beautiful city floating in an alien sky. There was no going back now. For better or worse, this was his life now, and in 7 days he would either prove himself or die trying. The training ground sat on the edge of the floating city, where the white stone platforms gave way to open sky. Kyle stood at the edge and looked down. There was nothing below but clouds and more clouds stretching to the horizon. The drop had to be miles. Step back from there, Leora said, coming up beside him. Unless you plan to test if humans can fly. Kyle moved away from the edge quickly. His heart was pounding. Do students ever fall off? Only once, Leora said. Then she smiled. That is a joke. We have safety nets made of magic, though they only work for Sylvari, so perhaps you should be extra careful. Kyle could not tell if she was joking about that part too. He decided not to ask. The training ground was a large open space. Other dragon riders were practicing nearby. Kyle watched as an elf did flips in the air while standing on his dragon's back. Another pair dove straight down, disappearing into the clouds, then shooting back up at impossible speeds. Everyone moved with such confidence, such grace. I will never be able to do that, Kyle said. Leora put her hand on his shoulder. They have trained their whole lives. You have 7 days. We will focus on what matters. Staying on Ember's back, basic sword work, and most importantly, learning to trust your bond with her. Ember walked over and lowered her head to Kyle's level. Her eyes were golden with flecks of red like embers in a fire. She made that rumbling purr sound again. Touch her forehead, Leora instructed, right between her eyes. Clear your mind and just feel. Kyle reached out slowly. Ember's scales were warm under his palm. He closed his eyes and tried to quiet his thoughts. At first nothing happened. Then he felt it. A presence in his mind that was not his own. It was curious and warm and ancient. It felt protective, like how he imagined a mother bear might feel toward her cubs. Images flashed through his mind. He saw himself through Ember's eyes, small and fragile but glowing with something she recognized. Not magic, but something equally important. Determination, courage, the will to protect others. She thinks you are worthy. Leora said softly. That is the greatest honor a dragon can give. Kyle opened his eyes and found himself staring into Ember's gaze. Thank you, he whispered to her. I will do my best. Ember huffed and a small puff of smoke escaped her nostrils. Kyle was starting to understand that was her way of showing approval. Now, Leora said, let us begin. First lesson. Mount and dismount 50 times. You need to do it without thinking. In battle, you might need to move fast. Kyle groaned but climbed onto Ember's back. Then climbed down. Then up again. By the 20th time, his legs were burning. By the 40th, he wanted to quit. But he kept going. When he finally finished the 50th one, he collapsed on the ground, breathing hard. Good, Leora said. Now we do it again, but this time Ember will be moving. She was not joking. For the next hour, Kyle practiced climbing on and off Ember's back, while the dragon walked around the training ground. Then while she trotted. Then while she ran. He fell off more times than he could count, but each time he got back up and tried again. When Leora finally called for a break, Kyle could barely move. Every muscle in his body hurt. Sweat soaked his clothes. His hands were covered in scratches from Ember's scales. You did well for your first day, Leora said, handing him a water skin. Tomorrow will be harder, Kyle groaned. How is that possible? Tomorrow we fly, Leora said with a smile. Real flying. Not just straight and gentle like when we came here. Combat flying. Loops and dives and sharp turns. You will need to hold on with just your legs while using your hands to fight. Can I just die now, Kyle muttered. Save everyone the trouble. Leora laughed. Come, you need food and rest. We start again at dawn. She led him to a small building near the training grounds. Inside were rooms for visiting riders. Leora showed him to a simple chamber with a bed, a table, and a window that looked out over the city. Sleep well, Kyle, Leora said from the doorway. You will need your strength. After she left, Kyle collapsed onto the bed. He had planned to think about everything that had happened, to process the fact that he was on another world about to train as a dragon rider. But the moment his head hit the pillow, he was asleep. He woke at dawn to Leora pounding on his door. The next 6 days blurred together in a haze of exhaustion and pain and slow, steady progress. On the second day, they flew. Really flew. Amber took them high above the city, then tucked her wings and dove. Kyle screamed and held on with every ounce of strength he had. They fell toward the clouds at terrifying speed, then Amber spread her wings at the last second and pulled up. The force pressed Kyle into her back. His vision went gray at the edges, but he stayed on. They did it again and again. Dives and climbs. Barrel rolls that spun the world around them. Sharp turns that threw Kyle to one side. Each time he held on a little easier. Each time his body learned what to expect. On the third day, Leora gave him a sword. It was lighter than he expected and balanced perfectly in his hand. She taught him basic strikes. How to block. How to move his feet. They practiced for hours until his arms felt like lead. You will not be a master swordsman in 4 days, Leora said, but you can learn enough to keep yourself alive. The swarm creatures have no skill. They just attack mindlessly. You need to be faster, smarter. On the 4th day, they combined flying and fighting. Kyle held the sword in one hand while gripping Ember's back with his legs. They flew at targets that Leora set up. Wooden posts with cloth wrapped around them. Kyle swung at each one as Ember flew past. He missed most of them at first, but slowly he started to connect. The trick was timing, knowing when to swing based on Ember's speed and position. On the 5th day, other riders joined them. At first they had sneered at Kyle, the weak human who thought he could be a dragon rider. But after watching him train, they began to show grudging respect. One of them, an elf named Kellen, offered to spar with him. Kellen was faster and more skilled, but Kyle was learning. He blocked most of the strikes, even landed a few of his own. When they finished, Kellen bowed slightly. "You have the heart of a warrior, human," he said. "May you survive to fight many battles." On the 6th day, Leora took him high above the city to a place where the air was so thin, even the dragon tooth struggled to help him breathe. "We train here because the swarm lives in the void between worlds," she explained. "The air there is thinner than anywhere else. You must be ready." They practiced until Kyle could barely stay conscious. His lungs burned. His head pounded. But he did not quit. Could not quit. Too many people were counting on him. That evening, as the 3 moons rose above the city, Leora sat with Kyle on the edge of the training ground. "Tomorrow we leave," she said. "At dawn we fly to the swarm's forward base. 50 riders. The best warriors we have." "And you, am I ready?" Kyle asked. Leora looked at him for a long moment. "No," she said honestly. "You have learned more in 6 days than most students learn in 6 months. But you are not ready. No one ever truly is." She smiled. "But you are brave, and that counts for more than skill sometimes." "What if I fail?" he asked quietly. "What if I am not the person the prophecy spoke of? What if I get everyone killed?" Leora reached over and took his hand. "Then you fail trying, and that is better than never trying at all. My father used to say that courage is not the absence of fear. It is being terrified and doing what must be done anyway." She stood up and pulled him to his feet. "Come. You should rest. Tomorrow will be the longest day of your life." Kyle returned to his room. He lay in bed staring at the ceiling. Outside he could hear dragons calling to each other. Could hear the wind whistling through the towers. Could hear the city preparing for war. He thought about his old life. His boring job. His empty apartment. His routine that never changed. That life seemed like a dream now. Like it belonged to someone else. He touched the watch on his wrist. It pulsed with soft blue light. "Thank you," he whispered to it. To the old man who had sold it to him. To Leora's father who had created it. "Thank you for choosing me. I hope I do not let you down." Sleep came slowly. When it finally did, Kyle dreamed of darkness. Of a swarm that consumed everything. But in the dream he was not afraid. He stood with Leora on Ember's back, sword in hand, ready to fight. And when he woke at dawn, he felt something he had not expected. He felt ready. Dawn broke over Ethelgard with the 3 moons still visible in the purple sky. Kyle stood on the main platform surrounded by 50 dragon riders. They wore armor that gleamed silver in the early light. Their dragons stood beside them in every color imaginable. Red and blue, green and gold, purple and bronze. Each one was magnificent and terrifying. Kyle wore armor too, though it felt strange on him. Leora had found a set made for smaller Sylvari. It was lighter than human armor made from dragon scales woven together with silver thread. It fit him perfectly. Ember stood beside him, calm and ready. Kyle could feel her presence in his mind now. Not words exactly, but emotions and images. She was not afraid. That helped him be brave. Queen Alara stood on a raised platform above them. Her white robes billowed in the wind. She raised her hands and the talking stopped. Everyone turned to face her. "Today we strike back," she called out. Her voice was strong and clear. "For too long we have run from the swarm. We have hidden in our cities, watched our world slowly die. Today that ends. Today we attack their forward base. Today we show them that the Sylvari do not surrender." The riders cheered. Dragons roared. The sound echoed across the city. Alara looked directly at Kyle. "We ride with a human today. Some of you doubt him. Some of you think he will fail, but he carries the watch of Theron. He is trained with honor. He stands ready to fight for a world that is not his own. That is true courage. And courage is what we need most." Kyle felt his face grow hot. He had not expected the Queen to defend him. Alara continued. "The swarm base is 3 hours' flight from here. It sits at the edge of the dead zone, the area they have already consumed. You will see things that will break your heart. Cities that once floated now fall into dust. Forests turn to wasteland. Do not let grief slow you. We go to ensure no more worlds suffer this fate." She raised her sword high. "For Ethelgard, for the fallen, for the future, for Ethelgard," the riders shouted back. "Mount up," Alara commanded. Kyle climbed onto Ember's back. Leora mounted her own dragon, a sleek red creature named Crimson. She looked over at Kyle and nodded. He nodded back. "Formation," Alara called. She rode a massive silver dragon that dwarfed even Ember. The riders took to the air in perfect coordination. They formed a V shape with Alara at the front. Kyle and Leora flew near the middle. They left the city behind and flew toward the rising sun. For the first hour, the land below was beautiful. Green forests and blue rivers. More floating cities in the distance. Kyle even saw herds of creatures that looked like deer but with wings. They fled as the dragons passed overhead, but slowly things changed. The green turned to brown. The rivers dried up. The floating cities they passed were empty and crumbling. Some had fallen partially, the magic that held them failing. Then they reached the dead zone. Kyle gasped. One moment they were flying over dying land. The next they crossed an invisible line into nothing. The ground below was gray and lifeless. Not even dust. Just emptiness. Like someone had erased reality itself. No plants, no rocks, no rivers, nothing. "This is what they leave behind," Leora called over to him. "This is what they do to worlds." Kyle felt sick. How could anything fight against something that did this? They flew over the dead zone for another hour. Kyle tried not to look down, tried not to think about what had once been there. Cities, people, lives that were now just emptiness. Ahead, Alara called. The swarm base. Kyle looked forward and his blood ran cold. In the middle of the gray wasteland sat a structure that hurt to look at. It was not built from anything solid. It was made of darkness itself, shadows that twisted and moved. It pulsed like a living heart. And around it flew hundreds of void creatures. They were exactly as Leora had described them. Living darkness with no real shape. They shifted and changed as they moved. Sometimes they looked almost like animals, sometimes like clouds of smoke, but always they were wrong. Evil. Anti-life. "Battle formation," Alara shouted. Spears out, the riders spread out. Kyle pulled the spear from its holder on Ember's saddle. It was shorter than a normal spear with a blade that glowed blue with magic. The swarm spotted them. They turned as one and flew to meet the attack. There had to be 300 of them, maybe more. Kyle felt fear grip his chest. They were outnumbered 6-1. "Hold," Alara commanded. "Hold." The swarm raced toward them. They moved fast, so fast, like oil spreading across water. Alara raised her sword. "Now, charge." The dragons dove. 50 riders against 300 void creatures. The two forces met with the sound of thunder. Kyle held on tight as Ember plunged into the battle. A void creature came at them from the left. Kyle thrust his spear at it. The blade connected and the creature screamed. It was a sound like nails on glass, like metal tearing. The creature dissolved into smoke. Another came from the right. Ember twisted in midair and breathed fire. The flames were bright orange and white. The creature caught fire and fell away shrieking. All around them, dragons and riders fought. Kyle saw Kellen on his bronze dragon. He moved like a dancer, His sword flashed and void creatures died. He saw Leora on crimson breathing fire and striking with her spear. She was magnificent, but the swarm kept coming. For every creature they destroyed, 2 more appeared. Kyle thrust his spear again and again. His arms burned. Sweat ran into his eyes. A void creature came at them from above. Kyle did not see it until too late. It struck Ember's wing and the dragon cried out in pain. They started to fall spinning through the air. Kyle felt the bond between them snap into focus. He knew what Ember needed without thinking. He shifted his weight to the left. Ember compensated, rolled right, spread her good wing. They caught air and stopped falling. "Good girl," Kyle shouted. But the void creature was not done. It came at them again. This time Kyle was ready. As it dove, he stood up on Ember's back using only his legs to stay balanced. When the creature was close, he leaped, actually jumped off his dragon's back. His sword met the creature's center mass. They fell together. The creature screamed and died, turning to smoke around him. Kyle fell through open air. For a moment he thought he was dead. Then Ember was there, catching him on her back. He grabbed hold and pulled himself up. "That was insane," Leora shouted, flying close. "Also amazing." Kyle did not have time to respond. More creatures swarmed them. He fought with everything he had learned, blocked, struck, moved with Ember's rhythm. He saw a rider go down. A young elf whose name he did not know. The void creatures overwhelmed his dragon. They both fell into the gray emptiness below. "Push forward," Alara commanded. To the base. The riders formed up and drove toward the dark structure. The void creatures tried to stop them, but the dragons breathed fire and the riders struck with glowing weapons. Slowly they pushed through. When they reached the base, Alara held up a crystal. It was the size of her fist and glowed with brilliant white light. "This will destroy the base," she shouted. "But we must hold them off while I activate it." "Form a circle," the riders responded. They surrounded Alara while she began to chant in a language Kyle did not understand. The crystal grew brighter and brighter. The swarm attacked with fury. They threw themselves at the circle of riders. 3 more riders fell, then 4. The circle grew smaller. Kyle found himself next to Kellen. The elf was bleeding from a cut on his face, but still fighting. "You fight well, human," Kellen shouted between strikes. Maybe the prophecy was right. Kyle did not answer. He was too busy keeping void creatures away from Alara. The crystal reached blinding brightness. Alara threw it at the base. It struck the dark structure and everything went white. The explosion was silent, but Kyle felt it in his bones. The base collapsed in on itself. A wave of energy spread out, turning the void creatures to dust. They did not even have time to scream. When the light faded, the base was gone. Nothing remained but empty gray ground. The void creatures that survived fled back toward the darkness. "Fall back," Alara ordered. "Return to Ethelgard." The riders turned and flew home. They had won, but the cost was heavy. Kyle counted the dragons as they flew. Only 38. They had lost 12 riders. The flight home was quiet. No one cheered. No one celebrated. They had struck a blow against the swarm, but they all knew it was just the beginning. When they landed back in Ethelgard, the city came out to meet them. Kyle slid off Ember's back and his legs gave out. He sat on the stone platform shaking. Leora knelt beside him. "You did it," she said. "You survived. You fought like a true dragon rider." "How many more bases are there?" Kyle asked. Leora's expression grew dark. 20 that we know of. Maybe more. Kyle looked up at her. "Then we attack them all, one by one. Until they are gone, or we are." Leora helped him to his feet. "Now you sound like one of us." Queen Alara approached them. She looked at Kyle for a long moment, then bowed her head slightly. "I was wrong about you, Kyle Bennett. You are not just a shop worker anymore. You are a dragon rider, a warrior, and you have earned your place among us." Kyle bowed back. "Thank you, Your Majesty. But I am just doing what anyone would do," No, Alara said. "Most would run. Most would hide. You chose to fight. That makes you extraordinary." She looked at all the remaining riders. "We rest for 3 days, then we attack the next base. This war is far from over, but today we proved something important." She smiled. "We proved that the darkness can be beaten.